Welcome to Dreamy Old Stories. Here we tell slow and gentle tales from history. Stories that calm your mind and help you fall asleep. If you enjoy the journey, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin tonight's dreamy story. As the story continues, the pace remains slow and unhurried. There is no rush, only the quiet passing of time. You may listen closely, or simply let the sounds fade as the night gently moves forward. The night arrives again, but something about it has begun to change, not suddenly, not completely. Small points of light now appear where there were none before. Torches fixed to walls, oil lamps hung carefully, candles sheltered from wind. Darkness is no longer absolute, yet fear does not disappear with light. It shifts. Ancient people noticed this quickly. Light did not remove uncertainty. It rearranged it. A flame revealed what was near. It also deepened what was just beyond its reach. Shadows grew sharper. Edges felt more deceptive. What could not be seen felt closer than before. This new kind of darkness felt different from the old one. The old night was broad and even. The new night was broken. Broken darkness felt unpredictable. People learned that light created focus, not safety. It drew attention to one place, while leaving others ignored. This divided. Awareness. A person watching the flame saw less of the surrounding dark. Fear adapted to this realization. Ancient people did not abandon caution when light improved. They refined it. Movement remained slow. Listening remained important. Light became a tool, not a solution. This understanding prevented recklessness. Those who trusted light to fully suffered consequences. A misjudged shadow. A figure mistaken for absence. A step taken too confidently. Stories formed around these mistakes. Not as warnings against light, but as reminders of its limits. Light showed, but it also hid. This paradox mattered deeply. As artificial light spread, night became more active. Work extended slightly. Social gatherings grew longer, but this activity was measured. No one assumed night had become day. Fatigue still arrived. Judgment still softened. Fear of night now focused less on environment and more on the body. Tired minds made errors. Ancient people noticed that even with light, exhaustion remained dangerous. This reinforced the idea that night itself changed human capacity. It was not just about seeing. It was about being able to respond. Light could not restore alertness. Because of this, many societies limited how much activity light allowed. Lamps were dimmed intentionally. Fuel was rationed. Too much light tempted overextension. Overextension led to collapse. Fear of night thus evolved into fear of imbalance. Balance had been learned through centuries of rhythm. Disrupting it felt risky. Night still demanded rest. Even when work continued, it did so cautiously. New roles appeared: lamplighters, watchkeepers, night workers. These roles carried respect, but also concern. People understood the cost. Night work shortened life. It strained the body. This was observed, not theorized, but disease aged faster. Illness followed irregular sleep. Fear of night absorbed these observations. Night was not just when danger occurred. It was when limits were tested. Because of this, communities protected sleep strongly. Sleep was no longer just rest. It was defense. Those who slept kept society stable. Those who did not slept less well. This awareness shaped cultural values. Hard work was admired. But endless work was distrusted. Night set boundaries, even for ambition, as lighting improved. Religious and philosophical thought adjusted again. If darkness could be pushed back slightly, what did that mean for meaning? Some feared that light would weaken reverence. Others believed it revealed progress. But both sides agreed on one thing. Light did not replace night. It existed within it. This agreement preserved ancient caution. No matter how many lamps burned, the sky remained dark. Stars still ruled above. The vastness of night was unchanged. Artificial light fell, small by comparison. This scale reminded people of humility. They could brighten their streets. They could not brighten the world. This distinction mattered. Fear of night remained connected to scale. Humans could manage small spaces. They could not control the whole. Night reminded them daily. As we continue, we will explore how this tension between light and darkness shaped deeper fears. Not fear of the unknown outside, but fear of losing the rhythm that kept life balanced. For now, the lamps flicker gently. They hold their place, and beyond them, darkness waits, unchanged, patient, reminding humanity that light can visit, but night still belongs. As light spread cautiously through ancient streets and homes, the night did not retreat. It adapted. People learned that brightness brought new choices, and choices brought new risks. The question was no longer only whether one could see, but whether one should continue. This distinction mattered deeply. With lamps burning, some believed night had been weakened. Others sensed something more subtle had happened. The boundary between day and night had blurred slightly, and blurring boundaries created discomfort. Ancient people valued clear divisions. They understood where one state ended and another began. Twilight already challenged this clarity. Artificial light extended it. Extended twilight felt unnatural, not dangerous, but uneasy. The body responded first. Sleep arrived later. Rest became lighter. Dreams shifted. People noticed they woke feeling different, not refreshed, not fully tired, something incomplete. This feeling did not need explanation. It was felt widely. Fear of night adjusted again. It became fear of disruption of rhythm, of cycle, of return. Ancient societies had learnt stability through repetition. Sunset meant closure. Darkness meant rest. Light interrupted this agreement. Those who used light carelessly paid a price. They worked longer. They slept less. They grew irritable. These changes were noticed quietly. Communities did not ban light. They moderated it. Rules appeared slowly. When lamps should be lit, when they should be extinguished. Light became scheduled. This scheduling preserved the ancient rhythm while allowing limited extension. Fear of night thus became fear of excess. Too much darkness was dangerous. Too much light was destabilizing. Balance remained the goal. As night activity increased slightly, new moral concerns arose. What happened after dark now had more opportunity to happen at all. Conversations extended. Conflicts lingered. Words spoken late carried consequences into mourning. Ancient people noticed that fatigue loosened restraint. Light allowed speech to continue when judgment should have rested. This created new caution. Around nighttime speech, silence regained value. Choosing not to speak became wise. Fear of night was no longer only about what might happen externally. It was about what might be said or done internally. The mind tired faster than the flame. This realization deepened respect for night. Night demanded humility even when light was present. Artificial light revealed surfaces, but not intention. It could not illuminate motive. It could not restore patience. Because of this, ancient thinkers argued that light without wisdom was insufficient. Wisdom belonged to rhythm, not brightness. This idea entered philosophical thought. True clarity was not constant. Illumination. It was knowing when to see and when to stop seeing. Night taught stopping as technology improved. This lesson became harder to remember. Fear preserved it. Fear whispered reminders: slow down, go home, sleep. These whispers were not dramatic. They were habitual. People felt unease when staying awake too long. That unease protected them. Night also became associated with secrecy in new ways. Light allowed gatherings after sunset. But shadows still existed. Private spaces multiplied. Fear adjusted again. Secrecy itself became suspect. Not evil, but risky. Communities valued transparency during the day. At night, transparency weakened. This was understood. Thus, trust shifted. With time of day, promises made at night were reviewed in the morning. Decisions made at night were reconsidered. Night gained a provisional. Quality, nothing decided in darkness, was final. This protected social stability. Fear of night thus became a filter. It slowed commitment. It invited reconsideration. Ancient people learned that night magnified emotion. Joy felt louder, anger sharper, sadness deeper. Light did not change this. It only extended. Exposure, fear of night, encouraged emotional restraint. Wait until morning. This phrase held power. It allowed distance from impulse. Distance preserved relationships. This may have been one of night's greatest contributions. It taught delay. Delay prevented regret. As we continue, we will see how this tension between light and restraint shaped deeper cultural attitudes toward progress, innovation, and the limits of human control. 4. Now, the lamps burn steadily, not bright, not dim, and the night, aware of their presence, continues its quiet work, reminding humanity that seeing more does not always mean understanding more, and that rest still belongs to darkness. As this balance between light and darkness settled, fear of night took on a quieter form. It no longer spoke loudly. It reminded gently. People did not fear the dark itself as much as they feared forgetting what darkness taught. Artificial light made night feel negotiable. But experience showed it was not removable. No matter how many lamps burned, bodies still tired, minds still slowed, attention still narrowed. Night continued to shape human limits from within. Ancient people began to understand this deeply. Night was not only an external condition, it was an internal one. When light extended activity, the body resisted. Not immediately. Gradually, sleep shortened, dreams thinned. Irritability increased. These changes accumulated quietly. Fear of night evolved into respect for sleep itself. Sleep was no longer passive. It was protective. Communities that ignored sleep weakened over time. This pattern repeated often enough to be remembered. Night enforced restoration. Fear helped people listen. Those who rested endured. Those who resisted aged quickly. This knowledge passed without instruction. Parents noticed children falter without rest. Elders noticed strength decline. Night became associated with renewal not because it was gentle, but because it required surrender. Surrender felt uncomfortable. Fear softened. Resistance to surrender. As light technologies improved further, tension increased. Progress promised freedom from darkness. Experience suggested cost. Ancient cultures stood between hope and memory. Hope wanted extension. Memory warned restraint. Fear sided with memory. This did not stop innovation. It guided it. Light was improved carefully, used selectively. No culture rushed to erase night entirely. Even when possible, they hesitated. This hesitation was wisdom shaped by fear. Night also retained its role as boundary between inner and outer life. With light, people could see faces. But fatigue revealed truths. Expression slipped. Voices soft. Night revealed what daylight masked. This revelation could be uncomfortable. Fear encouraged privacy. People learned not to push conversation too far after dark. Some truths needed rest before being spoken. Night provided that rest. This created a rhythm of disclosure. Day revealed outward truth. Night processed inward truth. Both were necessary. As centuries passed, this understanding hardened into instinct. Even in well-lit spaces, people felt when it was time to stop. They could not explain why. They simply felt it. Fear lived there, not panic. Recognition that limits had been reached. This fear was gentle but firm. Ignore it too long, and consequences followed. Night reclaimed attention through exhaustion. It did not argue it. Waited that this waiting made night powerful. It did not need enforcement. It relied on biology. We will begin to see how these ancient fears survived dramatic change. How they persisted even as civilizations collapsed, reformed, and passed knowledge forward. The night remained, not as enemy, not as mystery alone, but as reminder. For now, the lamps dim naturally, voices trail off, bodies settle, and the night, patient and unchanged, reasserts its quiet authority, guiding humanity back toward rest, where fear softens into understanding, and understanding into sleep. The night returns again, unchanged in its arrival, even as the world beneath it begins to break apart and reform. Civilizations rise. They weaken. They disappear. Yet the night remains steady as empires expanded and collapsed. Ancient fears did not vanish with stone walls or written laws. They traveled quietly, carried by habit and memory. When cities fell, light went with them. Streets grew dark again. Homes returned to shadow. People noticed how quickly night reclaimed space once structure failed. This observation lingered. Night became associated not only with danger or rest, but with fragility. What humans built could be undone easily. Darkness waited patiently. This did not inspire despair. It inspired humility. Survivors of collapse learned to respect Lemmisigin. They returned to older rhythms, earlier bedtimes, closer gatherings. Fear of night regained some of its earlier sharpness, not because people forgot progress, but because progress proved temporary. This lesson repeated often in ancient history. Each collapse reinforced memory. Night did not need to conquer. It only needed to outlast. People learned that control was conditional. Daylight achievements depended on stability. Night revealed what happened without it. This understanding shaped how later cultures approached growth. Cautiously, aware of reversal, fear of night became fear of loss. Loss of safety. Loss of order. Loss of continuity. Because of this, night became associated with endings. Not dramatic endings. Quiet ones. The slow closing of doors. The gradual dimming of activity. The acceptance that not everything could be preserved. Ancient people learned to let go at night. This skill mattered, holding to tightly created exhaustion. Night taught release. Release did not mean abandonment. It meant paused as societies reformed. They carried both progress and restraint. They rebuilt cities, but remembered darkness. They improved lighting, but preserved night rituals. This blend of memory and innovation defined many ancient cultures. Fear of night acted as anchor. It prevented extremes. Too much ambition ignored rest. Too much fear avoided growth. Balance survived because fear moderated desire. As writing spread, some of these feelings entered recorded thought. Writers described night carefully, not always as threat, often as weight. Weight of silence. Weight of memory. Weight of time. Night felt older than cities, older than laws. It witnessed everything. This sense of witness deepened. Fear subtly. Night seemed to observe human effort without judgment. It did not intervene. It did not assist. It simply remained. This constancy made human drama feel small. Some found this comforting. Others found it unsettling. Both responses reinforced respect. In times of uncertainty, people turned inward at night. They prayed. They reflected. They rested. Night became refuge from chaos. Even fear softened into protection. Outside was uncertain. Inside was contained. This containment mattered deeply during unstable periods. Night gathered. People together, families slept closer. Communities condensed. Fear of night reduced isolation. It encouraged proximity. This social function was powerful. Even as cultures changed, night continued to shape behavior. When new belief systems formed, they absorbed these ancient feelings. Night. Figures remained patient, watchful, slow, rarely impulsive, even when portrayed as dangerous. They followed rules. Rules reassured. Fear without rules overwhelms. Fear with rules instructs. Ancient night fear always had structure. It told people when to stop, where to stay, how to wait. This instruction persisted across generations. As history moved forward, the world grew more complex. Trade expanded. Ideas traveled, but night remained local. Everyone experienced their own darkness. This universality made night a shared human reference. No matter how different cultures became, night felt familiar. Fear of night, therefore, became one of the oldest shared emotions. It crossed language. It crossed belief. It required no explanation. As we continue, we will see how this shared fear adapted again during periods of deep religious change, when night took on new symbolic meanings layered over ancient instinct. For now, the night holds steady. Civilizations sleep. Ruins rest. And beneath every version of history, the same darkness returns, patient and unchanged, reminding humanity that no matter how far it travels, night will always arrive, asking quietly for humility, rest, and pause as belief systems shifted and new religions spread. The night did not resist them. It absorbed them. Ancient instincts folded easily into new meanings. Fear adapted without argument. Where older cultures spoke of cycles and balance, newer traditions spoke of testing, waiting, and endurance. Night fit all of these ideas naturally. It remained the time when certainty thinned. Religious communities noticed that night changed devotion. Prayers spoken after sunset felt different, quieter, more inward. Words were chosen carefully. Silence filled the spaces between them. This silence was not empty. It felt observant. People sensed that night demanded sincerity, performative belief. Felt exposed in darkness. This feeling strengthened fear in a subtle way. Not fear of punishment, fear of being known. Night felt like a mirror without light. It reflected inward. This inward reflection could be uncomfortable. Thoughts that were easy to ignore during the day surfaced at night. Doubts, regrets, questions without answers. Ancient people did not always welcome this. Fear arose not from danger outside, but from awareness within. This fear was harder to name. It encouraged restraint. People learned not to provoke the night unnecessarily, not to challenge it with noise or excess. Night demanded humility before belief itself. In many traditions, sacred figures associated with night were not creators or destroyers. They were guardians, witnesses, recorders. They watched rather than acted. This imagery matched experience. Night watched humanity. It did not interfere. This passivity made it powerful. Fear of night became fear of accountability. What was done in darkness might not be seen by others, but it was not forgotten. This belief encouraged moral discipline, not because of surveillance, but because of conscience. Conscience spoke more clearly at night. Day distracted it. Night amplified it. Ancient people noticed this amplification. They felt heavier. Responsibility after sunset. Actions felt more permanent. This feeling slowed behavior. It prevented impulsive harm. Night thus became associated with judgment, not immediate judgment. Deferred judgment, morning, would reveal consequences. This delay mattered. It allowed space for regret, for reconsideration. Fear of night worked as moral pause. As religions formalized, night rituals reflected this pause. Fasting through the night, keeping vigil, waiting until dawn. These practices were demanding. They tested patience rather than strength. Endurance mattered more than effort. Night was the testing ground, not because it attacked, but because it waited. Waiting was difficult. Fear of waiting sharpened resolve. Those who endured night emerged changed. Not triumphant, calmer. This calm was valued. It suggested inner alignment. Night stripped away excess. Without distraction, only intention remained. The stripping felt threatening to those unprepared. Fear protected the unready from exposure. People approached night rituals carefully. They prepared mentally. They rested beforehand. Fear encouraged respect. As societies absorbed these ideas, night fear deepened but did not intensify. It became quieter. It lived in custom rather than panic. People spoke softly after sunset, not out of terror, but reverence. They avoided unnecessary action not because they expected harm, but because they understood cost. Night became sacred boundary again, not between safety and danger, but between outer life and inner truth. Crossing that boundary required care. Fear guided that care. As history continued, these layers accumulated. Older fears remained beneath newer meanings. Survival fear, social fear, moral fear. They did not replace one another. They stacked. This layering made night complex. No single explanation sufficed. Night could be restful and unsettling at once. This ambiguity endured. We will explore how this layered fear persisted even as belief systems conflicted, merged, and transformed. And why night continued to hold emotional authority even when doctrines changed. For now, the night remains still. Belief settles. Thought deepens, and in the quiet space between darkness and dawn, ancient fear waits patiently, not demanding attention, only offering reminder. As beliefs continued to change and overlap, night remained steady beneath them all. New names were given, new stories told. But the feeling stayed familiar. People noticed this. No matter which gods were honored, the night felt the same. No matter which laws were followed, darkness still slowed the body. No matter which prayers were spoken, fatigue still arrived. This constancy gave night authority beyond doctrine. It did not belong to one belief system. It belonged to experience. As traditions merged and sometimes conflicted, night acted as neutral ground. Arguments paused after sunset. Debates softened. People grew quieter not because they agreed, but because night reduced certainty. Certainty required light. Without it, humility returned. This humility prevented belief from becoming absolute. Night reminded people that conviction had limits. Even the most confident thinkers hesitated. After dark, this hesitation protected communities from extremity. It allowed space for doubt. Doubt was uncomfortable, fearful. But it prevented rigidity. Fear of night, therefore, preserved flexibility. This was one of its quiet roles. As long as night existed, no belief could fully dominate without pause. Every day ended. Every voice rested. This cycle humbled. Ideology, it returned everyone to the same state of rest. Fear lived there, not fear of destruction. Fear of surrender. Surrender to sleep, to uncertainty, to not knowing. Ancient people learned that surrender was unavoidable. Resisting it caused suffering. Fear helped them accept it sooner. Night fear was therefore not resistance. It was preparation to let go. As time passed, this acceptance shaped storytelling deeply. Night scenes were rarely about conquest. They were about waiting, watching, enduring. Heroes did not defeat the night. They passed through it. Passing through was the goal. Morning rewarded patience, not force. This narrative reinforced ancient instinct. You do not fight darkness. You move carefully within it. This lesson remained consistent across centuries, even when societies became more confident. Night fear held restraint in place. It reminded people that effort had boundaries. Energy was finite. Sleep reclaimed it. Night demanded payment for extension. Those who borrowed too much from night repaid with health, clarity, or peace. This cost was remembered culturally. People warned one another gently. Rest. Wait. Morning will come. These phrases carried the weight of generations. They were not comforting slogans. They were survival advice. As knowledge spread, through writing, these lessons traveled farther, yet they remained rooted in the body. No text could erase fatigue. No belief could cancel darkness. Night fear remained embodied. This embodiment gave it durability. Ideas changed. Bodies did not. As we approach the next part, we will begin to move closer to the threshold between ancient and later worlds, toward moments when fear of night met new forms of confidence, and when old instincts were tested more strongly than ever before. For now, the night completes another cycle. Beliefs settle, voices fade, and humanity, shaped by countless nights lived, carefully across changing worlds, lies down once more, carrying ancient fear not as burden, but as quiet guide, waiting without urgency for the return of light. The night returns again, familiar in its shape, even as confidence begins to grow beneath it. By now, humans have learned much. They have built higher. They have traveled farther. They have learned to shape light with more precision. And still, the night remains. This persistence begins to create tension. Ancient fear does not disappear when knowledge increases. It changes its position. People begin to feel that night should no longer hold the same authority. They know more now. They can see more. They can plan. Yet the body continues to respond as it always has. This mismatch is important. As societies grow more confident, fear of night becomes quieter but more stubborn. It no longer explains itself easily. People ask why unease remains when danger seems. Reduced, the answers are not obvious. Streets may be lit. Walls may be strong. Guards may be trained, but sleep still arrives. Fatigue still blurs judgment. Darkness still narrows attention. Ancient people begin to sense that fear of night was never only about threats outside. It was about vulnerability inside. This realization is subtle. Night does not frighten because of what it contains. It unsettles because of what it removes. Certainty, control, momentum during the day. Effort feels effective. At night, effort meets resistance. Even powerful individuals feel this. Leaders tire. Plans feel heavier. Decisions feel harder. Night equalizes. Again, this equality becomes uncomfortable for those accustomed to command. Fear grows here, not fear of harm. Fear of limitation as societies push forward. Night becomes a reminder that progress is not continuous. There must be pauses. Pauses interrupt ambition. Ambition resists interruption. This resistance creates inner conflict. People try to push night away. They extend work. They ignore fatigue. For a time, this seems possible, but consequences follow. Mistakes increase. Tempers shorten. Health declines. Ancient observers notice patterns. Repeating, they see that ignoring night leads to instability. This recognition revives respect. Fear returns. But refined, not panic. Recognition that limits are real. Even if invisible, this recognition spreads through culture quietly. People begin to speak of night as demanding payment, not punishment. Cost every hour taken from rest must be repaid later. This repayment comes as exhaustion, illness, confusion. Fear of this cost shapes behavior more effectively than fear of darkness itself. People learn to negotiate with night. They borrow sparingly. They return promptly. Night becomes a ledger. This metaphor appears across cultures. The idea that time taken must be balanced. Fear becomes accounting. This is not dramatic fear. It is practical. Ancient people trust what repeats. They trust patterns more than promises. Night's pattern remains reliable. No matter how skilled or powerful, no one escapes it. This universality gives night authority. Authority without force. Night does not argue. It waits. Waiting is difficult for confident societies. Waiting feels like stagnation. Fear of stagnation competes with fear of exhaustion. This competition shapes culture. Some choose speed. Others choose restraint. History records both. Those who choose speed often burn brightly and briefly. Those who choose restraint endure longer. Night becomes associated with endurance. Endurance is quiet. It does not announce itself. It accumulates. Ancient people begin to value those who respect night. Those who stop when stopping is needed. Those who understand that rest is not weakness. Fear helps protect this understanding. Without fear, ambition overwhelms. With fear, ambition pauses. This balance remains fragile. Every generation tests it again. As confidence grows, fear fades slightly. As consequences appear, fear returns. This cycle repeats endlessly. Night becomes teacher through repetition. It does not change its lesson. It waits for attention. As we continue, we will explore how this ancient tension between confidence and restraint carries forward, shaping how later societies misunderstood night and why fear persisted, even when people believed they had outgrown it. For now, the night settles once more. Lights remain on in some places. Others go dark. Bodies respond as they always have. And beneath new knowledge and old instinct, the same quiet message returns, steady and patient, asking humanity once again to pause, to rest, and to remember limits learned long ago. As confidence continued to grow, people began to speak differently about the night, not with reverence, not with fear openly expressed. They spoke of mastery. They spoke of overcoming darkness through knowledge. planning, and control. Yet beneath this language, behavior told a quieter story. People still hesitated before traveling far at night. They still lowered voices. They still slept. The ancient fear remained, even when denied. This denial created tension. To admit fear felt outdated. To ignore it felt reckless. So fear learned to hide. It expressed itself as caution, as preference, as habit. People said they simply preferred daylight. That night was inconvenient. That rest was efficient. The language changed. The instinct did not. Ancient people were not naive about this contradiction. They noticed how night continued to shape emotion. Confidence dropped after sunset. Certainty thinned. Thoughts became heavier. Even when danger was unlikely, unease remained. This unease puzzled thinkers. If fear was only about threat, why did it persist without threat? Slowly, the answer emerged. Night reduced stimulation. Without constant input, the mind turned inward. Inward attention was not always comfortable. Thoughts wandered. Memories resurfaced. Unfinished matters returned. Daylight distracted from these processes. Night allowed them. Fear of night thus became fear of introspection. Not because introspection was harmful, but because it was honest. Honesty can be unsettling, ancient. People learned that night revealed internal imbalance. Fatigue magnified emotion. Small concerns felt larger. Regret felt sharper. Light could not prevent this. Even in illuminated spaces, the body knew it was night. Hormones shifted. Energy dropped. These changes were subtle but reliable. Fear adjusted. Again, people feared what night might reveal within themselves. This fear encouraged structure, routines before sleep, familiar tasks, repetition. Repetition calmed the mind. It prevented thoughts from spiraling. Nighttime rituals were not superstition. They were regulation. They regulated emotion. As societies grew more complex, stress increased. More responsibility. More expectation. Night intensified stress when left. Unmanaged fear warned of this. People learned to protect night from excess stimulation. They dimmed lights. They reduced noise, even as technology allowed brightness. Restraint returned. This restraint was ancient wisdom, resurfacing. Fear guided it. Night also became associated with vulnerability in reputation. Actions taken at night felt riskier socially. Witnesses were fewer. Context was limited. Misunderstandings were more likely. Ancient people noticed this too. They learned to postpone sensitive matters, not because night corrupted truth, but because it complicated it. Fear of complication guided delay. Delay protected. Relationships. This function of night fear is often overlooked. It preserved social cohesion. By encouraging pause, it reduced conflict. Anger cooled overnight. Jealousy softened. Impulses faded. Morning brought perspective. Night fear thus protected. Reason it created distance between emotion and action. This distance mattered deeply. Without it, societies fractured more easily. Ancient people did not frame this as psychology. They experienced it as instinct. Night felt like a boundary. Crossing it carelessly carried cost. Fear marked the boundary. As confidence grew, this boundary blurred. People tested it. Some learned. Some did not. History remembers both outcomes. The fear of night persisted not because people failed to progress, but because progress did not change human nature. Bodies still tired. Minds still wandered. Night continued to influence cognition. This truth could not be engineered away. As we continue, we will see how later generations attempted to redefine night entirely, and why ancient fear resurfaced even stronger when people believed they had finally escaped it. For now, the night deepens thoughts. Slow. Energy wanes. And fear, quiet and familiar, does not shout or threaten. It simply waits, reminding humanity that rest is not weakness. And that night, however well lit, still asks for humility. As this quiet struggle continued, fear of night settled into a deeper layer of human experience. It was no longer argued with. It was no longer explained. It was felt. People began to realize that night did not need justification. It asserted itself through the body. No belief could prevent sleepiness. No confidence could hold focus forever. No light could fully replace rest. This realization softened resistance. Instead of trying to erase night, people learned to manage their relationship with it. Management was calmer than control. Fear played a role here again. Not sharp fear, persistent fear, the fear of misalignment. When routines drifted too far from natural rhythm, discomfort followed. Sleep became restless. Mood shifted. Health declined. These signals were difficult to ignore. Night communicated. Through consequence, ancient people trusted consequence more than theory. If something failed repeatedly, it was adjusted. So night regained its authority quietly. People returned to limits not because they believed in them intellectually, but because life functioned better with them. Fear helped guide. This return, it discouraged excess. It encouraged preparation. Preparing for night became a sign of wisdom, not just locking doors or lowering lamps, but slowing thought. People learned to release unsolved problems before sleep. This release was not resignation. It was postponement. Postponement protected clarity. Night fear thus became protective of mental space. Without it, thoughts tangled with it. Thoughts rested. This rest improved judgment later. Morning decisions felt lighter. Fear of night, therefore, contributed indirectly to better choices. It was a quiet investment. As societies grew more interconnected, the pressure to ignore night increased. Trade extended. Messages traveled farther. Time zones did not exist yet, but delay did. Night interrupted communication. This interruption was frustrating. Some attempted to work through it. They paid the cost. Miscommunication increased. Errors multiplied. Night punished. Haste without intent. It simply removed support. Those who learned this lesson respected delay. Fear of night preserved patience. Patience preserved accuracies. This relationship became clear over time. Night was not obstacle. It was filter. Only what could wait survived. This filtering shaped culture deeply. Ideas matured overnight. Plans refined. Impulses faded. Night fear encouraged incubation. Without it, creativity burned out quickly. This paradox surprised many. The same darkness that limited action improved thought. Fear did not prevent engagement. It improved timing. Ancient people began to trust this timing. They stopped forcing resolution after dark. They learned to stop asking night for answers it could not give. Instead, they allowed it to hold questions. Holding questions was uncomfortable. Fear lingered there, but it was productive discomfort. It created space for insight later. As history moved forward, this subtle wisdom was passed through behavior rather than instruction. People watched elders rest. They followed example. Night fear became tradition without language. It survived translation. It survived belief change because it lived in the body. We will see how this embodied fear persisted into later eras. Even when people believed themselves modern, rational, and unafraid, night would still arrive. Bodies would still respond, and fear, quiet and adaptive, would still guide behavior beneath explanation. For now, the night completes another slow cycle. Questions are set aside. Breathing, steady, and in the darkness, ancient fear does not demand attention. It simply does what it has always done. It reminds humanity to stop, to rest, and to wait patiently for the clarity that only morning can bring. The night returns again, but now it arrives carrying memory. Not just personal memory, cultural memory. By this point in history, fear of night has been lived, tested, challenged, and adapted many times. It no longer feels ancient to those experiencing. It feels normal. People no longer ask why the night feels heavy. They simply recognize the feeling. As societies move closer to what we would call later eras, confidence grows stronger. Tools improve. Knowledge spreads. Light becomes more reliable. And yet, the night continues to feel different. This difference is no longer explained through spirits or symbols alone. It is explained through experience. People notice that mistakes still happen more easily at night, that misunderstandings still multiply, that emotions still intensify. These patterns persist across cultures and centuries. This persistence creates a quiet question. If fear of night remains even when explanations change, perhaps the fear was never really about belief at all. Perhaps it was about being human. Ancient people did not frame it this way, but they felt it. Night stripped away layers of identity. Titles faded. Roles softened. A ruler lying awake at night felt closer to a farmer lying awake at night than either felt during the day. This closeness was unsettling. Days separated people through activity. Night returned them to the same state. Vulnerability, this. Vulnerability was not dangerous by itself, but it was revealing. People were alone with thoughts they could not escape. During the day, movement hid these thoughts. At night, stillness exposed them. Fear arose here. Fear of doubt. Fear of regret. Fear of unfinished lives. These fears were quieter than fear of predators, but they were heavier. They did not rush. They lingered. Ancient people learned to respect this weight. They learned not to provoke it unnecessarily. They developed customs to soften it. Stories told softly before sleep. Familiar sounds. Predictable routines. These were not entertainment. They were protection. Protection from the mind turning too sharply inward. Night fear thus became psychological without being named as such. It protected mental balance. Without it, introspection could overwhelm. Fear signaled when enough was enough. As time passed, night also became associated with memory itself. Memories returned more easily after dark. Not because the night caused them, but because nothing distracted them. This return could be comforting or painful. Both carried intensity. Ancient people noticed that grief felt heavier at night. Loss echoed louder. Fear of night included fear of sadness, not sadness as weakness. Sadness as depth. Depth required space. Night provided space. Space could feel endless. Fear helped keep that space contained. It reminded people to rest rather than dwell. Endlessly, this containment was necessary. Without its sorrow could stretch too far. Night fear was therefore compassionate. It did not eliminate feeling. It limited exposure as societies grew more reflective. This emotional role of night became clearer. Night was when the heart spoke louder. Day was when the world spoke louder. Both were needed. Fear guided the transition. It told people when to listen inward and when to return outward. This guidance was subtle. People rarely articulated it. They followed it instinctively. As generations passed, these instincts deepened. Children learnt them without instruction. They felt uneasy staying awake. Too late they felt relief when lights dimmed. These feelings were inherited, not genetically in the modern sense, but culturally. Night fear became part of upbringing, not as warning, as rhythm. This rhythm stabilized emotional life. It prevented constant intensity. It allowed cycles of engagement and retreat. Without night's fear, retreat would feel like failure. With it, retreat felt necessary. As we continue, we will begin to move toward the closing understanding, toward how this ancient fear did not fade with time, but transformed into something quieter, something still present in modern life, even when night seems conquered. For now, the night deepens again. Thoughts slow. Further, breathing becomes steady, and fear no longer sharp, no longer loud, rests gently in the background, doing what it has always done best. It reminds humanity to pause. As this understanding settled, fear of night became less visible and more embedded. It no longer announced itself as fear. It appeared as preference. People preferred quiet after sunset. They preferred familiar spaces. They preferred to delay decisions. These preferences felt reasonable, not emotional. Yet they carried the same ancient logic. Night was when certainty weakened. Not because truth vanished, because perception shifted. Ancient people observed that confidence did not survive fatigue. The mind became less precise, the body less responsive. This observation was repeated so often that it became expectation. Expectation shaped behavior more strongly than belief. People planned important tasks for morning. They trusted daylight with complexity. Night was reserved for maintenance, for care, for pause. Fear of night was therefore practical. It guided scheduling. Even when people claimed not to fear darkness, they structured life around it. This contradiction went mostly unnoticed. Fear does not need recognition to function. It works best when it feels normal. As communication improved across distances, night gained new significance. Messages sent late could be misunderstood. Words without tone felt heavier. Ancient people learned that night flattened nuance. Without visual cues, meaning narrowed. This narrowing created risk. Fear adjusted again. People learned to avoid difficult communication at night. They waited for light. Light restored context. This habit prevented conflict. Fear of night thus became fear of misinterpretation. This fear protected relationships. In times of crisis, night intensified emotion. Urgency felt sharper. Hope felt thinner. Ancient people noticed that despair crept in more easily after sunset, not because the night caused despair, but because the absence of activity magnified it. Fear of night included fear of hopelessness. This fear encouraged sleep. Sleep reset emotional balance. Night forced sleep when people resisted it. Fear softened resistance as societies moved forward. Night continued to serve this function. It shut down momentum. It insisted on rest. Those who ignored it paid psychological cost. Anxiety increased. Judgment faltered. Ancient fear anticipated modern understanding without language. It recognized limits because fear of night was rooted in experience rather than superstition. It survived change. It adapted to new explanations. Science did not erase it. Progress did not remove it. They explained parts of it, but not all. People could understand why fatigue affected mood, and still feel uneasy in darkness. Understanding did not cancel feeling. This persistence puzzled thinkers. Why did fear remain? When danger had decreased, the answer lay in complexity. Night fear was not a single emotion. It was layered. Fear of the unknown, fear of vulnerability, fear of imbalance, fear of introspection. These fears overlapped. Removing one did not remove the others. As night grew safer externally, internal fears became more prominent. Silence amplified thought. Darkness reduced. Distraction, fear responded to attention turning inward. Ancient people learned to manage this inward turn. They used night for rest rather than analysis. Fear guided that choice. It warned against thinking too long in darkness. Some thoughts needed daylight. This wisdom was passed subtly. Parents told children to sleep, not to worry. Sleep was protection. Fear of night thus protected mental health long before the concept existed. It limited rumination. It preserved clarity as we approach the final part. This becomes clear. The ancient fear of night did not survive because people failed to advance. It survived because it addressed needs that never changed. Bodies still need rest. Minds still need rhythm. Night still enforces both. For now, the night continues. Breathing deepens. Thoughts soften. And fear, no longer dramatic, no longer sharp, remains quietly present. Guiding behavior without words, reminding humanity that stopping is not defeat, and that rest is not retreat, but preparation for the light that always returns. As these quiet lessons accumulated, fear of night settled into something almost invisible. It no longer felt like fear. It felt like instinct. People did not say the night frightened them. They said they were tired. They said tomorrow would be better. They said it could wait. These phrases carried ancient knowledge. Night was no longer a place of monsters or mystery. It was a place of limits, limits that could not be negotiated. No matter how confident a society became, no matter how well it understood the world, night continued to narrow possibility. This narrowing was not hostile. It was corrective, it reminded people that endless effort was unsustainable. That attention had edges. That emotion needed containment. Ancient fear of night matured into acceptance of this truth. Acceptance did not remove discomfort, but it gave it meaning. When unease arrived after dark, people learned not to fight it. They learned to interpret. Unease meant it was time to stop pushing, time to rest, time to let go of unfinished thought. Fear became signal rather than warning. This transformation was subtle, but profound. It allowed fear to exist without control. Night fear no longer dictated action through panic. It guided behavior through timing. Timing mattered more than bravery. Those who respected timing endured. Those who ignored it suffered quietly. History recorded this again and again. Civilizations that forced constant activity burned out faster. Those that preserved rhythm lasted longer. Night fear preserved rhythm. It protected the pause between efforts. It allowed renewal, even as explanations changed. This function remained. Night continued to be the time when humanity stepped back from itself, from ambition, from conflict, from certainty. This stepping back felt uncomfortable. Fear lived there, but it was necessary discomfort. Without it, people would rush endlessly. Fear slowed the rush. As modern understanding approached, people began to think they had outgrown night. Fear, they named it irrational, primitive, unnecessary. Yet Bohemia told another story. People still slept. They still hesitated at night. They still felt heavier emotions after dark. They structured lives around morning clarity. They delayed important choices. They dimmed lights before rest. Fear had simply changed language. It now spoke through biology rather than belief. Ancient fear became embodied regulation. This regulation did not require stories or rituals. Anymore, it required only the body. The body remembered what the mind tried to forget. Night activated that memory as we prepare to move into the final part. This realization becomes central. Fear of night was never about darkness itself. It was about what darkness revealed: limits, vulnerability, need for rest. These truths did not belong to ancient times alone. They belonged to being human, and they still do. Dart for now, the night settles fully. Movement ceases. Thoughts loosen their grip. Fear no longer stands at the door. It sits quietly nearby, familiar, almost gentle, doing what it has always done. It tells humanity, without words, that enough has been done for today, and that waiting is not failure, but wisdom carried patiently from countless nights lived long ago. The night returns one last time in our telling, calm and unhurried. By now, the fear that once felt sharp has softened into something familiar. It has traveled far. It has changed shape many times. And yet, it still arrives with the same quiet. Authority. Across ancient centuries, Night was feared not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. It stripped away momentum. It reduced noise. It asked questions without demanding answers. People learned to live with those questions. They learned that the night did not need to be solved. It needed to be respected. This respect showed itself in small choices. Going home instead of staying out. Sleeping instead of forcing thought. Waiting instead of acting. These choices were not dramatic. They were repetitive. Repetition is how wisdom settles into the body. Ancient fear of night became wisdom through practice. It taught people how to close the day gently, how to release effort without shame, how to trust that unfinished things could wait. This trust was not blind. It was earned. Morning always returned. That return mattered more than any belief system. No matter what people believed about the world, dawn proved something reliable. Cycles held. Darkness did not last forever. Night fear existed inside this certainty. Fear was not despair. It was patience, it said, not now. Over time, people learned to hear this message clearly. When they ignored it, consequences followed. Fatigue, error, conflict. When they listened, life steadied. Ancient cultures did not need to name this pattern for it to guide them. They felt it. Night reorganized priorities. What seemed urgent during the day often lost weight after sunset. What seemed unbearable softened, distance returned. Perspective. Fear of night protected that distance. It prevented the day from consuming everything. As centuries passed, this function remained even when the original reasons faded. People no longer feared predators in the same way. They no longer relied on firelight alone, but they still feared exhaustion. They still feared loss of control. They still feared the consequences of pushing too. Far night held these fears quietly. It gathered them without judgment. This gathering allowed rest. Rest restored. Clarity. Returned power. Night fear thus completed a cycle. It weakened people temporarily so they could recover strength. This paradox was understood intuitively. Weakness at night prevented collapse later. Ancient people did not frame it as strategy. They framed it as common sense. You do not argue with the night. You prepare for it. You yield to it. You pass through it. This passing through became a metaphor for many things. For grief, for uncertainty, for waiting. Night taught that waiting was survivable. Fear made waiting tolerable. Without fear, waiting would feel empty. With fear, it felt purposeful. Night fear gave waiting shape. It told people what to do while nothing happened. Be still. Be quiet. Be patient. These instructions were simple. They did not promise reward. They promised balance. As we move deeper into this final part, the question shifts. If night fear taught so much, why does it still feel uncomfortable? Why does unease remain? Even when danger is minimal, the answer lies not in history alone, but in continuity. The human body is not changed as fast as human tools. The body still responds to darkness by slowing, by conserving, by turning inward. This response is ancient. Fear accompanies it naturally. Fear says, pay attention. Attention is not alarm, it is awareness. Ancient fear of night trained awareness. It trained people to notice when energy faded, when judgment blurred, When rest became necessary, this training did not end with ancient times. It continues quietly in every generation. When people feel uneasy staying awake too long, when they sense that a conversation should wait, when they choose sleep over insistence, these are echoes. They are not relics. They are living patterns. As we continue, we will move toward the quiet ending of this story, not a conclusion that explains everything, but a resting place that feels familiar. For now, the night holds steady. Breathing deepens again. Thoughts loosen, and the ancient fear, having done its work, remains nearby, no longer urgent, no longer sharp, simply present, waiting patiently as it always has for the slow, reliable return of light. As the night settles deeper, the fear that once felt so necessary becomes almost invisible. It does not announce itself. It does not demand attention. It simply lingers. Ancient people lived with this lingering presence for so long that it shaped their sense of what it meant to be alive. Life was not constant motion. It was movement followed by stillness. Night enforced stillness. This enforcement was not punishment. It was correction. Without correction, effort would stretch too far. Desire would overreach. Energy would thin beyond repair. Fear of night prevented that thinning. It reminded people to gather themselves back, even when the world felt urgent. Night whispered that urgency could wait. This whisper mattered. It allowed people to survive, not just physically, but emotionally. Ancient people did not speak of burnout or overload. They spoke of exhaustion, of heaviness, of losing one's way. Night prevented that loss by slowing pace. Fear was the signal that slowing was necessary. As societies matured, this signal became quieter. People no longer trembled at darkness. They sighed. That sigh was recognition. Recognition that the day had ended. Recognition that effort could stop. Fear softened into relief. This transformation is important. Fear did not vanish. It changed purpose instead. Of guarding against danger, it guarded against excess. Excess of thought, excess of feeling, excess of action. Night fear protected balance. This balance was fragile. Whenever people tried to eliminate it, consequences followed. Sleep shortened. Tension increased. Judgment weakened. Ancient cultures learned this lesson repeatedly. They passed it down without words, through timing, through habit, through example. Children watched adults rest. They learned that stopping was allowed, that stopping was wise. Fear of night made stopping respectable. Without fear, stopping might feel lazy. With fear, it felt necessary. This distinction preserved dignity. Night fear allowed rest without shame. It told people they were not failing. They were aligning with rhythm older than thought. As history progressed, explanations changed. But rhythm remained. Science would later explain fatigue, hormones, circadian cycles, but explanation did not replace experience. People still felt uneasy pushing too far into the night. That unease was ancient fear translated into sensation. It lived. In the body, bodies remember what stories forget. Night activated that memory gently. A heaviness behind the eyes. A slowing of thought. a quiet desire to stop. Fear was no longer sharp enough to frighten. It was soft enough to guide. This guidance was one of humanity's oldest tools. It required no belief, only attention. Ancient people learned to listen to. It'd been like stabilized. When they ignored it, instability followed. This pattern was reliable. Night taught reliability. It arrived. It stayed. It left. Fear followed the same pattern. It arrived with darkness. It stayed quietly. It left with morning. Nothing permanent this impermanence made. Fear tolerable. It did not trap people. It passed. Knowing that fear would pass made it easier to accept. Acceptance softened its edge. This cycle repeated endlessly. Through wars. Through growth. Through collapse, night remained adapted. As we move toward the final closing of this long reflection, one truth becomes clear. Night was never an enemy to be defeated. It was a companion to be understood. Fear was the language. Of that understanding, Lao language, not urgent language, slow language, language that spoke through sensation rather than thought. Ancient people learned to hear it, because they had no choice. Modern people hear it too, even when they pretend. Not to it arrives when screens dim, when voices quiet. When the world slows, it says the same thing it has always said. Enough for now, for now. The night holds us gently. Breathing is steady. Muscles soften. And fear, having guided us this far, does not demand anything more. It waits calmly beside us, as it has waited beside countless generations before, knowing that soon, without effort, the light will return. And so, the night reaches its quiet end, just as it always does. Not with an announcement, not with a conclusion, but with a gradual softening. Ancient fear does not leave suddenly. It fades, it loosens its grip as breathing deepens, as thought slows, as the body accepts rest. This fear was never meant to stay awake forever. It was meant to guide, then step aside. For ancient people, night was feared because it revealed truth gently but firmly. It showed where strength ended, where effort failed, where rest became necessary. That truth was uncomfortable at first, then familiar, then trusted. Over time, fear became less about the dark itself and more about forgetting what the dark taught. The lesson was simple. You are not endless. You are not constant. You are part of a rhythm. Night enforced that rhythm when nothing else could. It slowed humanity without asking permission. It asked people to sit with uncertainty, to wait without control, to rest without resolution. These were difficult skills. Fear helped people learn them. Without fear, the night might have been ignored. With fear, it was respected, and respect allowed survival. This is why the fear lasted, not because humans were weak, because they were observant. They noticed that life worked better when night was allowed to be night, when rest followed effort, when silence followed noise, when waiting followed urgency. These patterns did not belong to one culture or time. They belonged to being human. Even now, long after ancient fires have gone out and cities glow through the dark, the same responses remain. Eyes grow heavy, thoughts slow, the urge to push fades. People still feel that familiar hesitation late at night. That quiet sense that something should wait. That feeling is ancient fear, not panic, not dread. Recognition that the day has done enough, that the mind needs space, that the body needs release. Fear no longer warns of predators. It warns of imbalance. It protects sleep. It protects clarity. It protects tomorrow. This is why it never disappeared. It changed its voice, but not its purpose. And so the story does not end with night being conquered or explained away. It ends with night being accepted. Accepted as teacher. Accepted as boundary. Accepted as pause. Fear too is accepted, not as something to fight, but as something to listen to. When fear arrives quietly after dark, it is not asking for attention, it is asking for rest. And when rest is given, fear dissolves naturally. The night does not need to be feared anymore. It has already done its work. It has slowed the world. It has gathered thought. It has carried humanity safely through countless ages of darkness. Now it releases its hold. Breathing is slow. The world is still. And somewhere beyond this darkness, morning waits as it always has, patient and certain, until then there is nothing more to do. The night holds what remains, and fear, having guided us gently to this quiet place, finally rests as well.